The article component is now a contained one, which takes it further into the presentational direction. But one can argue that it still depends on the store API here by calling the lookup author method directly from the store object. It would be ideal if we can extract this logic as well and have it maintained by a different entity. Since we now have a store provider function that basically renders this article with the same props, we can have this function also pass extra props. Just like we did with the store, we can have it pass the author directly. So I want to basically remove this line and also remove the store constant here and just assume that the author object is coming from the props as well. Now, this author logic needs two things to be invoked, a store and an article, which is part of the original props. So I can basically have a function that applies to exactly these two things, the store and the original props of the wrapped component. And I'll make this function return a simple object with the new props that I want this article component to have. So that'll be the author, which is coming from a call to store.lookupAuthor for the original props.article.authorID. So a good name for this function would be extra props. Now, since the store provider has access to both the original props and the store object, all we need to do is have the store provider invoke this extra props function and make its returned object part of the props that it uses on the wrapped article component. We'll use a functional programming trick to pass the extra props function to the store provider. We'll make store provider a function that returns another function and pass extra props to the first function and keep the wrapped component as the argument for the second function. So in store provider, it'll now be a function that returns another function. Arrow functions make this really easy to write. And now this first function will have access to an extra props function as an argument. And in here, when we render the original component, we'll also pass a new set of props. We'll spread the extra props function called using the store object, which is part of the context here. So this .context.store, and the original props, which in here would be just this .props. Just like that. And that's it. Things should actually work at this point exactly as they do. But if you take a look at the tree now, you'll see that the article container component passed down both article and author. It also passed down the store, which I didn't really use here, but I'll leave it here in case some other component needs extra control over the store object. So this store provider function is now a customizable higher order component because it can accept a generic function, extra props, that we can use in any component to isolate any props logic that depends on the store, which leaves the wrapped component as a pure presentational one that only receives normal props and present a UI for them. If you've used the React Redux bindings before, this should look familiar because it's similar to what the connect function in that library does. This is now a recognized good pattern to do when you need components to access things out of the context API because it isolates that access into just one function instead of different individual components accessing the context API on their own.